Our newest member of our board, Dave Shermanik. Dave has been a long-time resident of town, lives over at Florina Court, and you just got off the Fenton High School board, right?
Yeah, I was on it for a little over 7 years.
Right. Okay. Welcome to this meeting of the Wooddale Community Development Commission. My name is Roy Sy. I am chairman of the Wooddale Community Development Commission. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Shermanik?
Here.
Welcome. First time I'm calling you. Mr. St. Marie?
Here.
Mr. Vant is not here. Mr. Woods?
Here.
Mr. Damasco? Is not here. Chairman Sy?
Here. I declare our quorum present. I will now entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 17, 2017. I'll make that in a motion.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have one public hearing scheduled tonight. All testimony will be given under oath, and at the hearing there will be an opportunity for the public to offer testimony and to comment. Following the public hearing, our deliberations will be open to the public. In a sense, they all are invited to listen and to watch. The public, however, may not speak during our deliberation. State statute requires a vote by the majority of the members of the Community Development Commission for those matters that will be referred to the City Council for approval, and for those matters on which the Community Development Commission makes the final decision. Staff will provide a general description of the proposal followed by their analysis. Since the one public hearing on tonight's agenda was proposed by staff, once the staff presentation is completed, I will open up for public comment. Once the public comment is open, you may give an opinion or present specific evidence as to why you believe that the proposal meets or fails to meet the standards for the request. Whether you're a member of the public wishing to make a statement for the record or a witness testifying on behalf of the city or an objector, you'll be placed under oath and begin by stating your name and address. If you're not presenting evidence on behalf of the city or objector, your remarks will be taken after staff presentation, and all those who have filed appearance as an objector have presented their evidence. You will be subject to questions by the Community Development Commission and by the applicant or objector. To allow as many people as possible to be heard, if you are not an applicant or objector, we request that your remarks be limited to 5 minutes. If additional time is needed, the hearing will be continued until the next available hearing date. I will now call this matter before us this evening. The case we have is case number 2017-CDC-06 in regard to the proposed text amendment to Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. The purpose of the text amendment is to clarify and revise the regulations regarding non-conforming uses and structures in Article 3. Update and required compliance with Thorndale Corporate Corridor Overlay Regulations in Article 9, and increase the maximum height allowed for Type 14 buildings from 30 feet to 45 feet in Article 6 of Section 17605.B2. Will the Secretary please note that the same commissioners are present? I declare there's a quorum present. Staff, please provide a summary of the request and indicate notice of hearing was published and whether you have their certificate from the newspaper.
Would you raise your right hand, state your name and address, please?
Kelly Chrissy, 404 North Wooddale Road.
Do you swear to tell the truth, all the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Thank you. The notice of publication was made in the Daily Herald as required by law. Additionally, because of the overlay district, we did mail out individual property owners a letter indicating that we would be holding this public hearing tonight. So, as we go into, as the chairman mentioned, these are text amendments to Chapter 17 of our municipal code, which is the Unified Development Ordinance, and there are three. We're actually going to take these in reverse order just so that we can explain sort of the sequencing of events and why this is all packaged together. With regard to the proposed height amendment, if you'll recall, the CDC had three height variation requests in front of it within the last 9 months, 6 months, and the council approved all of those. So council actually directed staff to, instead of having these variations continue coming forward, to just amend the text to allow a building height. The 45 feet would allow an interior clear height of up to 36 feet and then provide some flexibility to ensure that the mechanical units could be properly screened with a parapet wall if they so chose. In terms of the impact that this would have, it only applies to the larger industrial properties. So it applies to I-1 and I-2 zoning districts, but it's only for those properties that are 2 acres or greater in size. So what we've done is we've highlighted the locations of those properties, and it's approximately 100 properties. Now, this actually gives them a greater allowance. As we noted, it's going from a 30-foot height, maximum height, to 45 feet. So that is the first text amendment. The next text amendment has to do with the Thorndale Corridor Corporate District. And I'm going to give a little bit of an overview for anybody that wasn't on the commission at the time. In 2009, the Thorndale Corridor Master Plan was adopted by the council to take advantage of the impending Elgin O'Hare Western Access Project, or the Illinois 390 as it is now known. To give a refresher, the corridor is highlighted here in the orange. The yellow indicates the vision to create a corporate main street. The blue represents the business park area, and then the green represents the recreational area that's been planned. Then in 2011, the council adopted the Thorndale Corridor Corporate Overlay District. And as you can see, it mirrors really the intent with the Thorndale Corridor Master Plan. The idea is to implement regulations that would help us achieve the master plan as it was set forth. However, since then, there hasn't been really any development that supported these goals. Then, in 2013, there was the groundbreaking for the Elgin O'Hare Western Access Project. And the construction up to Route 83 is to be completed by the end of this year with respect to the roadway. And so in light of that, and also the fact that in 2015, the council adopted the TIF district to further encourage redevelopment of this area in accordance with the plan. The TIF district was an economic development tool that will enable some additional assistance and encouragement. So I just want to point out that the TIF district is larger than the corridor master plan area, which is even larger than the overlay. So the overlay is a subset of that TIF district, and here's kind of a better representation of the properties within the overlay district. So again, the goal behind the proposed amendments here is to better align our goals in the master plan with the tools that we have available and the regulations that are in place, or that we're proposing to be in place to help further encourage that redevelopment. And so the proposal here is to require compliance with that overlay regulation for any change of use that's being contemplated, as well as property improvements. And that does include new construction, that does include any alteration or expansion of existing buildings. And so really what this would mean is that any of the existing uses, for example, that are not consistent with the plan, they would be considered the non-conforming uses, which is why we've looked at the non-conforming provisions as well. So in terms of the exceptions to the compliance requirements, you would still be allowed to maintain your building as is. You could still change out signage, but any change of use would then be required to comply. Now, I will note that we didn't change the regulations within it, just the trigger for when it's required that you adhere to those regulations, because when it was initially created, it was more of a an optional overlay. And so the only real trigger was the height, which is why we had to couple it together. So if you were requesting a height variation or any other variation from the lot development standards, then you would have to comply with the overlay regulations. But essentially, they were primarily voluntary. And so that doesn't help us achieve our goal within the master plan. So that's why this is being proposed. There are some other minor references in there to the Elgin O'Hare Expressway, and so that the terminology was just modified to update what it's currently being referred to as, which is the Illinois 390. And then I do have, if after we're done with this, if we wanted to go through the red line versions, I'm happy to do that. I've got that as well. And then, as I mentioned, the non-conforming regulations, due to the fact that there could be some non-conforming uses and buildings created as part of requiring compliance, we did want to make sure that we are current on our non-conforming regulations and very clear about what that would mean for existing businesses and property owners. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to ensure that there was the gradual elimination of the nonconformities. Currently, the code does require, after 10 years, that nonconformity is eliminated. And given the scope of what we're looking to do here, that didn't seem to be very prudent, and we were looking to be a little more flexible. The other thing is, recognizing the challenges and perhaps sometimes unique circumstances that may come up, we wanted to try and address, or at least be a little more flexible in how we can address some of those challenges. So the changes that are being proposed is to provide definitions, to provide clarity. We reordered the ordinance just so that it was a little easier to read in terms of the flow. We clarified how a nonconformity is classified or a determination is made and what types of proof can be provided in order to prove that it is a legal nonconformity. We also are proposing a requirement to consolidate lots. So if you had two non-conforming lots that are adjacent to one another, there would be a provision to consolidate those lots to either become conforming or to become closer to conforming, to try and eliminate those non-conforming lots. Then we also are proposing the elimination of exceptions for the nonconformities, but replacing it with an administrative exception for expansion of non-conforming use, and there are criteria in the proposed ordinance that we've outlined: expansion of a non-conforming structure, and then also reestablishment of an abandoned use. And all of these really have to be in line with a comprehensive plan for consideration or as one of the criteria for approval. The other thing we did, as I mentioned, was remove that elimination requirement for after 10 years of enactment, and this was enacted in 2010, so if we were to leave it, then by 2020, then the nonconformities would have to be gone, which is a pretty tough sell. So we were trying to be more flexible and recognize that some of these modifications or some of the continuation of these nonconformities really would have little to no impact on adjacent properties as long as they were consistent with the comp plan. And then, if they didn't have an impact on public health, safety, and welfare, then really it would, we could perhaps be a little more flexible. We do recommend approval, as we do believe that it is consistent with the UDO as well as the comprehensive plan and other planning documents that the city has adopted. And as I mentioned, I do have the red line versions. If anybody would like to go through and look at a particular page, or if there's a particular question about any of the proposed changes.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the red line version? Apparently not.
all I have.
That's all you got. Well, that was a wonderful presentation, but I have two concerns that people have approached me on regarding this development along the Thorndale. One is they're kind of concerned about the size of the TIF district. Is the fact that TIF district is putting a burden on all the other taxing bodies in town, the fire department, the school board, the park district. So maybe the city council can maybe kind of rehash that again. And the other thing is this area K, which is the recreational area. I had numerous calls from the coaches from the football and the baseball and the soccer leagues, and apparently when you had your little get-together over at the city hall, you had, not city hall, but the bank, they seen the map with the circles, and the circle included the the ball fields and stuff like this, and I says, no, that's not in there. So maybe next time if you're presenting that, just kind of say, that's just shows the circle showed like a radius of the area that we can do it. What could be in there? I says, because I had a fellow stop over the house, I kind of showed him on the diagram I had, and I says, you can see it's all cut off on the east side there, where on the east side of the ball field, so it's not affecting anything, because apparently they want to make some improvements up there, and they got some bum information from the park district saying that they're going to shut the ball fields down and stuff like this. So I talked with Commissioner Georgia Schroeder there, and she said she didn't know anything about it. So I said, people's imaginations start running wild when they see this stuff here. So if you get any inquiries on that, that's what it's going to be all about. And then some of the stuff about the non-conforming, you got some kind of tough part in there where it's the fact that after 1 year or 90 days or something like this, that you can start taking action on there. And I meant to get back to you during the week, but I just didn't. I think maybe that could be looked at.
If I could add, that's actually something that we hadn't proposed a change on in terms of the timing for what would be considered an abandoned use. So if we didn't feel that was necessary to change, that's pretty standard in most other ordinances, that you do give a time period, and a year is a pretty standard time period for what's considered an abandoned use. But as I mentioned, we didn't propose any change to that for this amendment.
Well, I kind of think if you run into another bad time like we just went through, it's the fact that somebody has an industrial building there that you can't find a tenant, after 90 days. That's kind of a short period,
What I will say, because the 90 days actually applies for land only, so it's not necessarily occupancy of a building.
Oh, okay.
So it is a little bit of a different application. But what I will say is that the reason why we've proposed the administrative exceptions is for, in the instance as you're describing, where perhaps there is some unique circumstance where there should be some flexibility, and that's why we've proposed that as part of the new regulations. because we understand that there are really some market conditions that may warrant keeping an existing use or reestablishing that use, as opposed to it sitting vacant. And so there's a little bit of flexibility that would be provided with those proposed amendments.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions from the board? You have to go up to the podium if you want to speak. You have to state your name and get sworn in. Is that, Mo, is that,
State your name and address, please.
So, Lou Wearsome, address is 845 Dillon.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I affirm.
nothing but the truth?
I affirm. I apologize, I wasn't planning on speaking. I just got the notice, so I thought I'd see how a village hearing went in Wooddale, and thought it worked out for my schedule, so I thought I'd come and see how things went down here. I didn't realize this is exactly what was on the agenda. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but I had heard a little bit about possibility of our area being affected by something of this corridor, and so I apologize for not being better educated about it, but just I would wonder how it affects our location along Dillon there. Is we would be affected by it in a 10-year period, or is the idea to turn that into like an entertainment district, or what exactly is the plan for, just so I don't waste the board's time, just our area specifically? We're at 845 there. I thought I saw my building in that area. Maybe we're not. What is that? Is that Dillon there?
If I'm not mistaken, is this your property, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit. And I realize it's a little bit, it's not really a one-for-one in this scenario, but it appears as though your property is perhaps in the business park area. And the one thing I do want to remind everyone of is that just because the picture looks this way doesn't necessarily mean that this is what's going to be built or how it's going to be built. The city council has actually entered into some contracts with engineers to continue studying this area to understand what the limitations are. So we've done an infrastructure study, we've done a stormwater management study, we've done a wetland delineation, and we're doing a water modeling study. And so the city council keeps moving forward with efforts to support this plan. But just because this plan exists does not necessarily mean that it will end up being in this exact layout in its final form, because one of the things that we were looking to do with the infrastructure plan, and one of the things that's, as you can see from this image here, the yellow streets, the dashed ones, are the existing street network, and then if you see the proposed plan, well, we're basically ripping up all of the existing infrastructure, which is not very efficient. And so we're looking at ways that we can reuse the existing street network as much as possible, while still maintaining the intent of the original plan, unless for some reason this city decides that's not the direction we're going. But everything that we've been doing thus far is in an attempt to support this plan. So, sir, to your question, the best I can tell you is that at this point, this is the general direction that the city's going, but there's nothing that's been set in stone as of yet. And so it looks as though you're within the business park area of the plan, which would mean that typical industrial uses that are within that area should be able to remain and continue. And likely you wouldn't, I'm not sure what your use is, sir.
We're a 15,000 square foot, we're a mechanical electrical contractor. We have a 15,000 square foot building, so it's a small building. I don't know if the idea is that they would turn into those, large precast buildings.
Well, so not necessarily. The idea is to try and have a more modern industrial park or business park area in addition to the corporate Main Street idea. And so based on what you're telling me, it doesn't sound as if your property would necessarily be affected by, we'd have to look at it in more detail. So I can't be certain, but based on what you're telling me, it doesn't seem as though you're falling within that corporate Main Street.
Okay,
So I can certainly follow up with you.
okay, I appreciate that. That's the only
Does
question
that
I
answer
had.
your question?
I just wanted to make sure that you weren't gonna tell me I had to be a hotel in 10 years. Because I wasn't planning on being in the hotel business.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, you always can contact the community development.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions or comments? Hearing no additional testimony, I will now close the public hearing for case number 2017 CDC-06. We will now proceed in deliberation on the merit of this request. Is there any discussion from the members of the commission? Mr. Woods? Well, there being no further discussion, I would make the motion based on the proposed text amendments to Article 3, Article 9, and Article 4, Section 17605B2 in the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code, as summarized in the staff manual. I move that the Community Development Commission adopt the findings of fact included within the staff memo as findings of the Community Development Commission and recommend to the City Council approval of case number 2017 CDC 06. That's my motion. I have a second.
Second.
Roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
If I could just ask to clarify the motion. So the motion is to amend Article 3, Article 9, and Article 6, correct?
6, yes.
Okay, perfect.
what
Just
did I-
wanted a
Should
clarification.
I transpose? Oh. I'm great at that.
Mr. St. Marie, did you second it?
I did second it.
Thank you. All right, a roll, please. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Shimena?
Yes.
Mr. St. Marie?
Yes.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
And Chairman Sack?
Yes. The motion to recommend approval of the proposed text amendments to Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code carries. Staff, do you have anything else to report?
We are working on some additional text amendments, which we hope to have before the CDC, probably at the October meeting. So we're going to bring another sort of package of amendments, and we're going to work on them kind of as we have more time, and we'll try and package them logically to bring forward for consideration.
Under other business, have you got any more additional information regarding the seminar in September out in Naperville?
As far as additional information,
Yeah, where it's at.
I'll get you that information. I apologize. I thought we had gotten that to you already. I apologize.
Okay. Is there any other business? Being no further business, I make a motion to adjourn. I made the motion, need a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you very much. We're kind of dry here, Dave, but